is the national chairman of the Prison Officers Association. Mark, I know that your workers are under a huge amount of strain. They're not paid enough money. They are doing a very, very difficult job, and there aren't enough prison places. Who's to blame for this?
Well, it's easy to play the blame game, isn't it, Peter? But this is down to successive governments over the last 30 years who failed to invest in the prison service in its entirety, from the infrastructure to staffing to wages, by hiring our retirement age. It's a complete mess, and we now find ourselves in this latest crisis where in 2 years' time, 12,000 additional spaces will not be available because we haven't built new prisons quickly enough. And this was wholly preventable and predictable. That's the sad thing about all this.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Because you can see that the prison population was only going up. Things like extending prison sentences, locking up people for longer, sending more people to prisons. I mean, the whole system's in crisis, isn't it, Mark? It's not just the prison aspect of it. It's the courts bit, it's the probation bit, it's everything. And we have a situation now, I don't want to draw you into the assisted dying debate necessarily, but we have a thing where, you know, High Court judges who could be sending people to prison, well, they're going to have to spend time thinking about assisted dying as well. So more pressure for them. But for the prison officers themselves, just paint a picture for us of what they are dealing with at the moment, because there's overcrowding already within those prisons, and actually keeping prison discipline and keeping prisoners actually healthy and behaving themselves is a very, very difficult thing.
It is, and the job has never been so violent and so risky. And day after day, my members are facing trauma on the front line at unprecedented levels. So you're dealing with self-harm, people trying to kill themselves, suicides, you're dealing with homicides in some prisons, you're dealing with violence prisoner on prisoner and violence prisoner on staff. Now, pre-pandemic, the highest levels of violence against staff were at 30 a day. We're now heading towards 29 a day. So we're getting back to those pre-pandemic levels of violence that we've never seen before. All this on top of a prison system which is under pressure, which is creaking at the seams, and a retirement age of 68, is it no wonder that people leave in their droves and find safer, better paid occupations? I
don't blame them for doing so. The National Audit Office said it would take until 2031 to complete the existing prison expansion programme of 20,000 cells. That would be 5 years late, 4.2 billion over budget, 6,518 of the 20,000 extra places pledged by the Ministry of Justice in 2021 have been delivered so far because of the plan's unrealistic and over-ambitious timelines. What is your message to the government now? Shabnam Mahmood is the Justice Secretary. What can she do? What can she and Keir Starmer do to sort this, or at least alleviate this a little bit for your members, for those prison officers in the short term?
Well, there's one thing for sure. You cannot build your way out of a prison building crisis, a population crisis. And if you build new prisons, unfortunately, you will always fill new prisons. And we have the highest prison population of anywhere in Western Europe. We have to do things differently. We have to do things better. So, for example, we've earmarked over £4 billion of taxpayers' money to build new prisons. Why don't we put that money back into the prison estate to totally modernise the prison estate? With that money, we could create additional mental health beds in our communities to rid our prisons of people with severe mental health disorders. Why don't we start looking at repatriating 10,000 foreign national criminals who are languishing in our prison cells at the taxpayers' expense? We could do so much. We could robustly manage with professional probation officers community sentences that the public have faith in.
Can that happen overnight, though? Because all of that, to me, seems to take a long time. I wonder as well, with foreign nationals as well, look, I think they should be deported, there's no doubt about that. But the fact is that if you're convicted of some crime in this country, you're sent to prison in this country, but you're a foreign national. Well, if you get sent home, there's no guarantee necessarily that you'll serve even a day in prison as a result of the crime that you've committed.
And that's the problem. And the other problem is you have to have the permission of the recipient country, and you have to know that that person is actually from that country, because many people don't have identity to prove which country they're from. So it is filled with problems, isn't it? And it works both ways, doesn't it, Peter? Because if we're going to do that to some countries, they're going to say, well, you can have your prisoners back.
Yeah, indeed, and that is a very, very difficult issue. In terms of modernising the prison estate, I mean, would that actually free up cells in terms of the plan that you're talking about there?
It would actually, because we've got a couple of thousand cells offline because they need refurbishing or because there's fire safety issues. So that would really help. And when you read that National Audit Office report, it actually states that we're 1.8 billion outstanding repairs, and that's because they outsourced the maintenance of prisons to private companies, one of which was Carillion years ago, which went bust, and now the other one is Amy. So they're not fit for purpose. We need it brought back in-house.
It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but it seems to me that even whether these private companies do it or whether the government does it internally with its own procurement processes, its own building processes, neither seems to work. So is this a private-public argument, or is any bit of the system actually working in terms of creating more prison places?
Well, the problem is, before they outsourced the maintenance of prisons, it did work. It worked very well. We had our own works department who were a lot cheaper and a lot more effective than what we currently have. So that's one issue that needs to be addressed.
Very, very interesting that there have been quite a number of prisoners, of course, released from prison early because of this crisis in our prisons, and Keir Starmer has done that. He says he's no option because of what the Conservatives left for him. Is that working, do you think? Is that in any way alleviating the pressures? A lot of people very annoyed at these criminals on the street serving perhaps 40% of the sentences behind bars, 60% in the community, although I'm not quite sure whether that resonates with people. Is this working from your officer's perspective, where a little bit of pressure has been taken off a little bit?
Yes, I fully understand the public's viewpoint, but what they've got to realise is it's only a 10% reduction. They would have been out in a matter of weeks anyway at the 50% point. But from our point of view, it was a necessary measure to alleviate the pressure we face. We simply ran out of space. At one point, we had less than 100 spaces in the entire country. So it is a temporary measure. It's given us some breathing space. We currently have about 3,000 spaces spare. But by next summer, we're back in the same situation that we've just encountered. So I know there's a sentencing review going on at the moment from the government. They have to really reconsider who we want to send to prison and for what type of crime.
How much confidence do you have in the Justice Secretary, Shabnam Mahmood?
Well, we have a positive relation with Shabana Mahmood, and she does seem to listen to us. Well, the proof is in the pudding. Actions speak louder than the words, so let's see what they come up with. We will work with them to get through this crisis and to keep the public safe.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed.